Welcome to Writer's Life, an ongoing conversation with writers, authors, and folks in the publishing industry. I'm your host, Marvel Harrison, Publishing Director, Mimbres Press of Western New Mexico University. It is a pleasure to share a conversation today with Shelley Moore, a writer, author of a poignant memoir that shares her improbable journey as a young white girl in the 1960s in Memphis. Welcome to Writer's Life, Shelley.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
So you haven't always been a published author. This is new in your genre, I think. So,
Yes.
tell us a little bit about how you got started and launched and how your transitions have been made.
Okay. Well, it's an improbable story. I'm a bit of an enigma in the writing world because I've had an unorthodox and unconventional path to writing this book. I'm not a trained writer, and I think it might interest your audience to know, and I preface this with no pride or apology, that I left high school after my junior year and never attended college. So even though I was encouraged for many years by friends and family members to write this book, I didn't feel like I was qualified to do so because of my lack of higher education. So long story short, I left Memphis in 1972 and didn't return for 40 years. And after returning to Memphis for me was going home. And I didn't realize what an impact it would have on my life when I made that move. And I had no intention of writing a book when I moved back to Memphis. But at some point, the inspiration hit, and I knew that if it were to be done, the book would be written in Memphis, that it had to be written there. So I took my laptop and I started going to the public library. For 2 years, I went to the public library and wrote. And I have to say hats off to my English teachers throughout my Memphis public school education, because their instruction stuck with me enough that it allowed me to write a coherent narrative. And I feel very fortunate for those years in the schools that I attended. So anyway, I obviously absorbed enough grammar and punctuation and vocabulary to be able to put a book together. And that's how it happened. I was 65 when I started writing the book.
And Shelley, I think about, through a blue-eyed lens, here's your book right here. It's a memoir of a chapter of your life. And you could be the only authority on that. You're the only person who could know it from your perspective and in your process. And it is very well written. And kudos to you being a writer without being trained as one, because we all have a story. And good for you being able to share it. Your tenacity is just really impressive. Going to the library every day and just, it has that Rollins feel to it, in the cafe, sitting down.
Right.
And this is a little bit of a simple question, but you mentioned your computer. Do you ever write on paper, or is it always composed on your keyboard?
I take a lot of notes on paper.
Okay.
And, like in the middle of the night, or when I'm eating lunch, or when I'm in the car, I take notes and I jot things down. But the actual writing always happens on keyboard.
Okay. So you kept tripping off to the library every day.
Yep.
And Share with us about that internal process, because this is a very heartfelt, personal story. I mean, a memoir obviously is, but this maybe even more so than many, bibliography type style books.
Right. Well, I have to say it was terrifying to start this process because it's not always a pretty story, and it's not always a comfortable story. And I've carried it with me my entire life since I was a young teenager. Um, so the process for me was very cathartic. I made an outline, and I changed the outline constantly, but that's how I approached the different periods in the book that I wrote about. And um, for me, it was truly an unburdening. Um, those were powerful years in my life. They were exciting, and they were terrifying, and they were uplifting and exciting, but it was hard to write about. And I had to really work on what to include and what not to include. Because I wanted the reader to get a sense of the time and the place and my tiny little insignificant part in all of that. So I hope that's what comes across to the reader.
Well, share with us a little bit in your own voice. How do you describe this story?
How do I describe this story? For me, the essence of this book, and this is something that I've come to after having published it, is that the essence of this book is a love story. That without the love story that's embedded in my narrative, this book would be anybody else's story about 1962 to 1972 in Memphis, Tennessee. But a young Black student and I fell in love in our own 13-year-old way.
Mm-hmm.
In 1967.
Okay.
And that was it was illicit, it was ill-advised, and it ended up being very consequential for both of us, our decision to date each other. There, no one around us, no one in the city looked like us. And so I felt like it was important to illuminate that piece of the story, and to also bring in his family, which was very involved in the civil rights movement at the time in Memphis, and my family story, because my dad worked for the city of Memphis at the time. So our two worlds collided and conjoined in unexpected and unprecedented ways when we started going out. So that's the nuts and bolts of the book, is how I got to Memphis in 1962, how I met my boyfriend, and how we journeyed together through a very difficult time.
Shelley, you talked about your writing being cathartic.
Mm-hmm.
How does that, tell us about that experience as you're sitting in the library? I mean, the real hands-on, there you are writing about this. I don't know, where did you go in the evenings? How did you keep the energy going and flowing for 2 solid years?
It wasn't at all difficult for me once I started the process. I did a tremendous amount of rewriting and editing over the 2 years. But I lived this book for 2 years. That's the reality of it. At night I sat on my couch and went over chapters and paragraphs and sentences, and memories kept coming back to me as I wrote about specific things that happened and people that I knew. So it was really a developing process for me over those 2 years. And it helped me personally so much to put this story onto paper, to finally get it out of my head and out of my heart, and and into a format that would reach people and hopefully inspire conversation and dialogue.
Well, it certainly does, and it certainly resonates with, current events of how much it maybe isn't different for some people even today.
Mm-hmm.
And that part about how you would reconstruct sentences and sit on your couch and pull it apart and put it back together, and then new memories would come, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's as a psychologist, it's like, I know that therapy is not a search for memory. Memory is a byproduct of the therapeutic process. And I think that's what you're describing.
That's
And
exactly what I'm describing.
right. And that it is developing into letting you be in a different way in your world now, even though nothing changed about what happened. But when you have that collection put together and on paper, and then having the courage to share the story,
Yeah, right. That was a whole unique step. I remember getting the first box of books
mhm.
delivered to my house, and I opened the box, and the the um, the most concise way I can put this is that I immediately felt like I was standing naked in front of the world. That this is such a personal story, and um, told at risk, told with some personal risk, because it's like 50 people can see a movie, and there can be 50 takes on the movie or opinions about the movie, or people like it or they don't like it, or they're offended, or whatever. And I knew that I was setting myself up for exactly that in putting this book out. And the good news is that I have received only very positive feedback from people whose own memories have been unearthed and inspired by reading the book. And that, to me, that's the greatest gift I could ever receive as an
Well,
author.
a gift to you and a gift to the world in terms of one more way and place for us to have a conversation. I
Mm-hmm.
can certainly see this, your book, in book clubs and spawning tremendous conversation. And I hope that that's, where that leads, because it certainly has brought you to a new place, even though the history hasn't changed. The grip it has on you, I think, has altered, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes. Yes,
And
definitely.
energized you in a way, it sounds like, to be able to be more grounded in, who and where and how you are today.
My son and I designed the cover, which is a wonderful tribute to family.
Yeah. Tell me about designing the cover with him.
Oh gosh.
Hold it up
Well,
so people can
yeah.
see it.
Well, my chapter headings are song titles
Mhm.
from that era mostly. And I knew I wanted the cover to be representative of an album,
Mhm.
a record album. So I had several images on my phone that I shared with him. And he and I sat down at his computer in Massachusetts, and I had the title, and he literally knocked this cover out in an hour. So we're birds of a feather, my son Josh and I, and we knew what we wanted and made it happen. And I love the cover. I think it
Terrific.
speaks, it's black and white, which speaks to the content of the book. It's the music, image, and it's the blue-eyed lens. A lot of people ask me where I got the title, and I have blue eyes. So this is that decade from my blue-eyed perspective.
Yes. Well, and I experienced the book as not just how you viewed the world through a lens, but through your heart and through your process and through the challenges of where you were in the world at that time.
Yes, absolutely.
And so what does it feel like being in Memphis now? You spend quite a bit of time there.
Memphis for me is home at this point. It's my home base. I still spend time in Wyoming, which is my home state, my birth state, but because I still have family here. But Memphis is home. And I think a lot of that sort of internal process has been due to having written this book there.
Okay.
I have met such interesting people and had such interesting opportunities and reunited with classmates and had heartwarming conversations with people. It's been a great process. I am so happy I did this.
Good for you. How do you experience Memphis now in contrast? I mean, obviously you're looking at it through a, mid 60s versus being 16,
Right.
but how do you experience it in this day and time?
Memphis is a tough city. It's a wonderful city. It's a beautiful city. And interestingly, I live about 1.5 miles from where I grew up in Memphis. So it's very familiar to me. And parts of the city haven't changed at all. What has changed is there is absolutely more social integration, black and white, and it runs the gamut of fusion of nationalities and races. So that's a lot more visible than it was. For instance, when I was dating this student in the 60s, we couldn't walk down the street together. We couldn't go to a movie together comfortably. So in that sense, just visually, the city has come so far, as has most of the country. But interestingly, I find Memphis to remain very segregated in other ways. People are dating each other more, but most of the schools I went to are over 90% African American at this point. And when I started in them, they were 100% white. So that shift has been complete in my lifetime. And that's really discouraging to me because although I'm not a Pollyanna about any of this stuff, believe me, but I do believe in the inherent goodness of people living and working and playing and learning together. And if we don't do that, then I don't know how we move from this point. So that's disheartening to me.
Well, you have created and brought a gift of invitation to people of all colors to, experience through your writing, a vantage point that really hasn't been probably very well described. And we need to get into each other's worlds to be able to learn and grow from one another. So, Shelley, thank you so much. Thank you for the book.
Marvel.
Thank you for your time. And, it's been a joy to speak to you today, Shelley, and and thanks to everyone who's joined us. And I'm Marvel Harrison, and from all of us at Mimbres Press, may your day be sparked with curiosity and wonder. See you again on the next Writer's Life. Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks, Marvel.